And just like that, Melinda, we're doing it. You're on the show. Congratulations. No, thank you so much, and welcome to the Appetite for Discussion podcast. This is the first episode of the new year, so congratulations for that. But also, can you believe it's been almost a year since I had the honor and privilege of presenting you with one of the future 5 awards for 2020 for the future leaders of our great city of Statesville.
Oh, wow. It has been a year, man.
Yeah.
Time flies when you're having all this fun this year.
That's right. And so for those of the audience listening that maybe aren't local and don't know you, you are a pharmacist and also the owner of Banner Drug Stores or stores in Iredell County.
Correct. So we've got, I've been a pharmacist for almost 16 years now, and bought Banner Drug in 2017. So I've had it 4 years, and then had the other 3 stores, the former First RX pharmacies, for a year now. So we've got location in Troutman, 2 in Statesville, and 1 in Harmony.
Congratulations. It's got to be a bit overwhelming and also a little, exciting too. Kind of jumping into one store to multiple stores, but you also have food that you provide. Several of your stores have grills which offer delicious food.
Oh, of course. Yeah, the 2 locations in town have grills in them. So got your good cheeseburgers and good special home cooked meals and all. But yeah, I mean, if you had asked me this 15 years ago and said, what are you going to be doing in 15 years? Owning 4 stores was definitely not part of it, but Hey, we go with it. And I mean, even last year after we bought them, I said, okay, we can manage. And then all of a sudden 2020 hit and COVID. So that just threw another wrench in our plans. So,
but what a great place. I can go get my cholesterol medicine filled and go get a cheeseburger. It all works.
There are healthier options.
Of course there are. But the cheeseburgers are delicious.
I know.
So, hey, let's just jump right into this. I wanted you to come on the show because obviously I've known you for a long time. You're a pharmacist and you're very much on top of what's going on right now with the COVID vaccine or vaccines that are being offered to the public. And eventually you guys will be offering the vaccine to customers. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep. I mean, I would thank you for saying I'm the to go to here, but I mean, I will give props to all the doctors and all the healthcare workers and all the pharmaceutical companies that have put this vaccine together. I mean, I know what I need to know and all, but I mean, it's amazing what all they have done in the last 10 months to get where we are now.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because right at the very beginning when I guess maybe it was back in March or maybe I can't remember exactly when President Trump said there will be a vaccine by the end of the year, and people were saying, well, that's impossible. It's never happened before. There's no way. And then, regardless of your political views, it's here and it's happening and people are being vaccinated.
Well, and I think that's what people don't realize is this, the vaccine that's out now, they've been trying to make a vaccine. I think it was for like the Zika virus. So, I mean, this has been like in the works for many years. They just have never had really a reason to get it out this quick. And so, I mean, I think that it was sitting there ready. So when the time came that said, oh, we've got a pandemic here, we've got something, we need it now, it was there ready to go. So.
And when you say, they've had this thing ready, it's the mRNA vaccine, right?
Right. So that's the difference between, say, our regular flu shot.
Yeah.
So our regular flu shot is actually an inactivated part of the flu vaccine or flu virus, the influenza virus, so that they use to make it so that your body starts to build up the immunity to it for that season. And so it can change year after year after year. Not to say that we don't know what COVID is going to do. And I mean, we've already kind of seen that it's mutating a little, how it's going to be next year, how it's going to be in 3 months. But with the mRNA vaccines, what they do is they take this little teeny piece of protein, and that's what is made in the vaccine's made of. So when you get it, it starts to immediately build those proteins onto your immune cells.
And
So
these are
when
the
your
spike proteins, right? That's what they call them.
Yep. So once your body starts to see those, and they're like, oh, that is what is on the COVID virus, we're going to start attacking. We're going to start building up the immunity to it. So you're not getting any type of the COVID virus when you get the vaccine.
Yeah, and that's something important for people to understand too. You're not actually injecting them with a live vaccine of COVID.
No. I mean, just like the flu shots. I mean, it's probably been, I don't even think the live vaccine was available when I started being a pharmacist. I mean, so 16 years ago, it was further back than that it was actually a live virus. So, but now, no.
And if I'm not mistaken, this little bit of research I've done, like basically the mRNA, and you correct me if I'm wrong, makes the spiked proteins, and basically it gives our cells instructions of how to identify and reproduce the spike proteins, right?
Right.
So when I was reading that, here's how I thought about it. Basically, the mRNA vaccine is giving our cells the instructions. And what's the old quote? Basically, it's teaching our cells to fish. You know, you can teach our cells to give them fish and feed them, or you can teach their cells to fish and they'll eat for life, or something like that. I totally butchered that quote, but essentially that's what they're doing, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, because that's what you want. You want it to replicate onto all our immune cells, so that when our body sees that, it's like, oh, let me go ahead and start building up my antibodies to this spike protein that they're seeing now.
So, question, and if you don't know the answer to any of this, you know, I'm not going to hold your feet to the fire for anything. This is information, just questions to get out there to help, you know, the population and people who are listening to the show. But when does the cells stop producing the spiked cells? Like, is this forever ongoing, or is it for a few months this happens? When do our cells stop?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would say it's kind of like with the people that have had the virus. How long do they have that immunity for? I mean, we don't know. I mean, that's what, 3 months, 6 months, a year. I mean, that's just going to be kind of, time will tell. So
it's interesting because the CDC has kind of went back and forth. They initially said if you've been exposed to COVID, you have antibodies for 6 months. Then they said 3 months, and I think somewhere they're back to the 6 month mark. But I know that, you know, my wife and I, for example, we still have antibodies.
Right.
So, and we're at, you know, right at month 6. So, yay, good for us.
Yay.
Which brings me to you know, another question. If you've been exposed and you have antibodies, is it recommended that you have the vaccine anyway?
I mean, I've seen kind of both sides. So yes and no. I mean, I would say with where we are right now, if you've had the virus, that the vaccine needs to go to those who have not.
Right.
Because you already have the antibodies in there. I mean, unless there's probably some type of underlying condition that you have. But I would say those, especially healthcare workers and the long-term care, those are the ones that we need to get the vaccine to first.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. You know, I'm going to have to receive the vaccine, I'm sure, at some point, regardless of or whatnot, just because of my profession, and whether I want it or I don't want it. If I want to put food on the table and, you know, a roof over our heads, I'm going to have it. So I think it's important for us to ask questions, and some questions I'm going to ask you are probably just going to be absolutely absurd, but it's questions that you have probably heard already out there in the community or in the world. But there is a population of people who ask like just interesting questions, to say the least. So the 2 vaccines that are available right now, one is from Pfizer, right? And the other is Moderna. Is that right?
Mrna, yes.
Moderna with an N. course, I'm going to
Yeah.
butcher those. So
That's
is
all
there
right.
any big difference between the two?
So I've got my little cheat sheet pulled up here too. Yes, there is. I mean, the Pfizer one, of course, was the first one that came out, but and that's and when it came out, it went straight to the hospitals because
Mhm.
the biggest thing for it is it requires the minus 90 degrees Celsius storage. So you've got your ultra deep freeze that you have to keep it in.
How
So
in the world did they come up with that number?
it that's how with like I guess with what they're using in it and to be able to keep the and that's another thing is when they make it in the messenger RNA, they have to put it in some type of lipid, some type of fatty cell to
Mhm.
deliver it into the body. So, and it's very unstable. So when it's frozen, that's when it's more stable. So, I mean, every time, like when we have to probably give it,
Yeah.
it loses that stability. Not that
Okay.
it loses it, but it just becomes a little bit more unstable.
Okay.
So keeping it frozen is your best option.
Because you can't inject it at negative 90 degrees into
Oh no,
someone's body.
oh
No.
no, oh no.
So if it warms up to less than room temperature, right at room temperature when it's injected, it still has the effectiveness, correct?
Oh yes, oh yes. It just can't stay like that
Gotcha.
for a longer period. So I mean, it's like, I mean, even with the Moderna one, I mean, it doesn't have to stay at 90 degrees. It does still have to stay frozen between it's like 15 and 20
Yeah.
degrees Celsius.
For
Like
X amount of minutes, or there's a
well, that's where
timeline there.
it stays, and then it can move to the refrigerator and stay there for 30 days
Okay.
in the refrigerator. But you do still have to once when you're getting ready to give it, you have to take it out, let it sit for I think it was like 2 hours
Oh,
to
wow.
get to room temperature. So there's a lot of logistics in there with each vaccine and how it's stored and administered.
And so both of these vaccines are two shots, right? And I think one's 21, 22 days and the other's 28 days apart or something like that.
Correct. Yeah. Pfizer is 21 days, and then the Moderna is um, 28 days.
Is there an age requirement or a limit that they're suggest? Like, for example, if I'm 100 years old, is it still okay for me to get the vaccine?
Yes. I mean, it's the limit. The only limit that I'm aware of is the Pfizer one goes to 16 years old.
Okay.
The Moderna one is 18. So,
So 16 and 18. So interesting because I wonder, I guess, what's the thought process behind giving the vaccine to a 16 or 18-year-old? Because that's a part of the demographics that we see are least affected and have the
right.
least amount of deaths. I think in the state of North Carolina, I was looking at this the other day, yesterday, as a matter of fact. I think
Mm-hmm.
you can go like to, actually, I got it pulled up right here. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's covid19.ncdhhs.gov. And you can
Right.
look, there's a graph here, and you can see the breakdown of how many cases, for example, age newborn
Mm-hmm.
to 75 plus years old. And if you look at the demographic of 15 to 17 right now, there's been 16,127 diagnoses. Now, they don't give the breakdown exact in the same uh, graph as that, but they do an age of deaths from 18 to 24, and there's been 9 so far.
Right. Right.
So there will be some people out there who may be very hesitant to give their vaccine to their 16-year-old son or daughter.
Right.
And but they're also not going to be the frontline people that get the vaccine. They're going to be multiple tiers
Yeah.
down the
So I
line.
mean, you got to think about it like this: that I mean, how they've got it set up, and I mean, with this being a government distributed vaccine,
Mhm.
so we've got so many protocols and steps that you have to follow. Um, I mean, the likelihood of any 16 to 18-year-old getting the vaccine anytime soon is probably slim to none. So, I mean, like you said, it's going to be your frontline workers, it's going to be your long term care, it's going to be your essential workers that are going to be the first ones to get.
When I was talking to a friend of mine, he dives deep down to the minutia of this stuff. Like,
Uh-huh.
you know, he gets in
Oh,
deep, and
oh,
which is great because he's kind of fun to talk to. Um, but he has his own theory of people getting vaccinated and when they should get vaccinated. And he brought up a good point that I hadn't thought about in vaccinating kids when it gets to them that are 16 or
right.
18 years old. It's at that time when that happens, will we know if the vaccine will have any sort of effect on reproductive stuff?
Mm.
Um, and I'm like, I don't know. That's a really
I don't
good
know.
question because we're only about 180 days out from the first person being vaccinated in the clinical trial.
Right.
So if we wanted to look at data-driven stuff, we really don't have any short-term data and we don't have
No.
any long-term data. If you're in like the medical device world and you're trying to introduce a new technology into the hospitals and into the FDA, you have to have years and years of clinical trials and studies and the efficacy and effectiveness on your product to make sure it's safe and effective. But
Oh,
then they
of
want to
course.
see 5-year, 8-year, 12-year, maybe even 15-year data. And
Well, and
so,
I mean, it's kind of like with this being having an emergency use for the COVID vaccine. I mean, they're relying on people to send in the adverse reactions that
yes.
anyone has, or any type of anything like that, for them to be able to um, compile together so that they'll have a little bit better understanding about, okay, how did this affect this population? How did it affect this population? Because that is one thing that with the trials, they were lacking in certain areas.
Oh, yeah.
Um, I know HIV was one that that population just didn't sign up for
Mm-hmm.
the initial trials. So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, now that they're trying to figure out, okay, how's it going to affect those that have had adverse reactions? How's it going to affect the HIV population? So, I mean, there's all kinds of variables in there that we're just going to have to kind of learn as we go to figure out what's going to be the long term.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to people submitting their own data, being having a background with working with clinical trials and
Mhm.
patients and doing stuff like that. In the very beginning, the patients are very gung ho and they're very
Right.
on top of sending in, their scores and their surveys and whatnot. But as time ticks along, it drops and drops and drops and drops
Right.
and drops and becomes
Right.
less. So, it's going to be interesting to see how all this kind of plays out and works out and what short-term or long-term effects could be, and that those are some things that kind of make people nervous. Because
Oh,
it is new. It's new for us because mRNA has not ever been used for us healthy people. They mostly use it in cancer patients, I think.
right. Right. Yep. Yep. So I don't know. I mean, it's a new technology, but it's been around. It just hasn't been used
Yeah.
in this situation before. So
The other interesting part about this and it being released so quickly through the trials, it makes me wonder if all the years of medications having to go through FDA clinical trials and them taking 5 years or however long, they said that most vaccines are going to take,
mhm.
was that just a bunch of red tape BS
Mm.
that they made people go through and things could be a whole lot easier than what the government makes it, you know, um, it's going to be interesting. Like, has this now set a precedent for things moving forward of,
Right.
this long, arduous, drawn out process is just a bit ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure that they can probably there's probably shorter ways and better ways to do it. Um, how things have went this last what 8 months? I mean, that's pretty darn quick for
Mm-hmm.
FDA approval. Um, but I mean, it's still you don't know.
Um, do we know? Let me ask you this too. So, well, I'm just going to ask you some questions. We'll role play.
Okay.
Okay, you play the pharmacist,
Okay.
and I'll play the layman coming off the street who is going to get vaccinated down the road. Okay.
Okay. All
All right.
right.
And you feel free to. All right. So,
I got
all right. So I'm coming in. I'm talking to you. I'm going to get this vaccine, and I've got some questions.
it. Okay.
All right. Number one, Is there a microchip in this vaccine? And are they going to be monitoring me?
No, sir. No, sir. I mean, I've heard it all too.
I know.
And that's what I was just sitting here trying to find, because I had it pulled up a minute ago.
And people are going to laugh at that. But honestly,
Yeah.
there is a population of people who are going to believe it.
A lot of people that think that. So yeah, here it is. So what is in the vaccine? The messenger RNA.
Yep.
The lipid that I said is what is going to transport it.
Mm-hmm.
Salt, sugar, and buffers. So for one thing, a lot of people, I mean, I see when they come into the pharmacy asking for flu shots, is it preservative free? Do you have the preservative free flu shot? Which I've carried some, but I mean, most of them have that small amount of preservative in there. But with this, there is no preservative, nothing. None. So, okay. I mean, you're straight up potassium chloride, sodium chloride, sucrose, cholesterol, and then the mRNA.
So the cholesterol is the fat that it's using to transport it.
Right.
That's the Uber that it's taking to get to the cell.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. The Uber. But I mean, sorry, no microchip.
Okay. So Bill Gates didn't put a microchip in there. Okay, good. All right. Now I have an allergy to eggs. Can I still have the vaccine?
This one, yes. Because like I said, when they make the flu shot, that's what they use is the protein from eggs. And that's how they come up with what the vaccine is made of for each year's influenza shot. So this one, no.
Okay. I have an underlying autoimmune disorder, and I've talked to my doctor about it, and he's on the fence of whether I should have the vaccine or not. But I think I want it, and I want to get it, and I'm here to get it.
Yep. Well, and see, like I said, too, the population that was in the initial trials, so they didn't have that many people that had autoimmune diseases in there. I mean, I've seen enough that, and I mean, I myself have one, and I'm like, I don't need to get this virus. So I'm like, I'll get the vaccine at some point.
Right.
But talking with my doctor, he agreed. So I think that's where the big thing comes to is you talk to your primary care or your rheumatologist, whoever, about it before you get it. But I think that's where we'll find out once people start getting the vaccine, getting the data, and seeing how it affects them.
Okay. All right. Well, I was at my doctor. He told me he was on the fence about me getting it, but I want to let you know I think I've been running a fever and I got a little bit of a cough. Can I still get this vaccine today?
No, I would probably say, and that's just my kind of from my experience. I mean, anytime that you're sick and you don't feel well, you don't want to get a vaccine. I mean, I think that's probably the biggest myth with the flu shot is people come in and they're like, can I get the flu shot today? I've kind of got a little cough. Well, and then they don't feel good for like 3 or 4 days after. And they're like, oh, I got the flu. So I would just say, no, wait.
Well, my wife is at home and she's pregnant and she wants to get the vaccine. Can she have it?
So pregnancy, yes, it's still in that same group of they didn't study it. So, but they do have, I think I had it still pulled up here.
Which I want to point out 2 things I think is very important that you said, and I think it's great for transparency. There were no pregnant ladies, I believe, in the clinical trial.
Yeah.
And there was also mostly, not all, but mostly people, I believe, in both clinical trials for Moderna and Pfizer were majority healthy people. Some had underlying health issues. I think more had underlying health issues in Moderna's trial than Pfizer's. But we really don't know how this is going to affect people who have 1 or 2 comorbidities or certain autoimmune disorders. Because reality is you and I, let's say, have lupus.
Right.
I may react totally different and have nothing. And you may have some sort of adverse reaction.
Right. So, I mean, that's where I think kind of going back to having those 4 or 5 years of trials and stuff beforehand
Right.
helps to capture more of those populations. So where we're going off of what 6, 8 months of trial data,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at other vaccines and they've got 4 or 5 years. Well,
Right.
they've looked at those people with autoimmune diseases that don't fit into the healthy
Right.
category. So,
and so when people ask me, like, are you going to get the vaccine? It's one of those things where I really don't. I mean, I guess I have a choice. I could be homeless and have my kids starve, or I can, have the vaccine. But I'm
right.
not one of those guys that's going to be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be first in line. I'm getting it. Boy. No,
Yeah.
because I'm not the first in line to do anything. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, imagine what the guy was like, the first in line who bungee jumped and found out the cord was too long.
True.
So I would like for some things to happen, because as of right now, no one has received the second dose yet, correct? Everyone's
Correct.
on the first.
Correct.
For the general population, not outside the trial.
Right. No, I mean, they're only looking at, they just started, what, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Given the vaccine. So, I mean, you're looking still at the 1st of January next week, at probably the earliest for, yeah, I guess that's right, for people to start getting the second dose. So, I mean, that's kind of my thought. I'm like, but I mean, as much as I'm around in the pharmacy and people coming in and out and being at different pharmacies too, I mean, I just want to make sure that I'm protecting not just myself, but all my employees, all my customers, and more important, my family. So, I mean, that's kind of where my thought is. I mean, yeah, I'm not one of the ones that's going to be the first in line to get it, but I don't want to be the last and
Right.
something happen in between there.
Well, you also have no control over when you get it,
No.
right?
No.
Okay, so I'm thinking about getting this vaccine, and I've heard some stuff on the interwebs. And is this going to alter my DNA in my body? Is it going to change who I am?
Brandon, maybe for you, it might. I'm kidding.
That's fair. That's fair.
So no. I mean, like we just said, I mean, the messenger RNA, the only thing it does is it travels to your cell. I mean, it doesn't go into your DNA. It doesn't, it's right on top. So, I mean, you're not changing any of the DNA in your body. So darn, you're still going to be you.
I'm still going to be. Well, I hope so. I'm trying to think if there's one other good question that I've heard people say or just ask in general. I've heard the first vaccine is the first shot's no problem. But I hear that second shot makes you feel awful, knocks you down, or even makes you feel like you've had the worst hangover in your life.
I mean, I have no idea. Just with not knowing.
Yeah.
I know, but true.
And if you true. And if you do feel awful and you have the worst like hangover in your life, you should drink BioLite.
I mean, for sure.
Which I mean, found at Banner Drug.
Exactly.
So, okay, but those are some of the most common questions that I've heard, and I've heard people just kind of kick around from the crazy things of, is there a chip going to be embedded in me? Is it the mark of the beast? Are people going to be following me? But the funny thing is, though, for people who say, like, are they going to be following me? They're following you now, folks. It's right here. It's in your pocket. They know everything we're doing. They know who I'm talking to. They know what I'm searching.
I mean, I could be sitting here looking on my phone and then pull up my computer and be like, oh, well, that's what I was just looking at on my phone. They're not connected. Wait a second.
What?
How are they doing that?
It's already here.
I
know. Okay, so let me ask you some things or give you some stuff that I've seen and talked about and whatnot that kind of feed to the conspiracy theories of stuff.
Okay.
Like, for example, we've already talked about it previously, but when the media and physicians and the people who are the experts come out and say there's no way a vaccine is going to be produced by the end of the year, and some have even said if it was, there's no way they would take it. So now there is a vaccine that is here, and now they're encouraging people to take it. So you tell folks on the front end that something is impossible, and if it were possible, they wouldn't do it. So now it's here, and they're like, oh yeah, you should absolutely do it. So it kind of, the conspiracy kind of feeds itself.
Oh gosh, yeah. And I mean, I don't know what their thought process was for saying that to begin with. I mean, maybe they just didn't think that it was possible. I mean, the
Well, it
science
never
and
been done
technology
before.
was there, has been there, but it just never had, I guess they never really had a reason to push it through and do something this quick. So to know, can Pfizer, can biotech, can Moderna do this and get it done by the end of the year? Well, yeah, they did. And I mean, that's pretty amazing to, I mean, I sat there and watched some of the Pfizer come off the um, manufacturing line and actually ship out, and to see the process on how that worked, I was just like, huh, I'm pretty amazed at that.
Yeah, I mean the whole thing from start to finish with what was Operation Warp Speed. I mean, this
Yeah.
whole thing's been incredible. Also, they're going to give us a vaccine. It's going to be 2 shots, but now they don't know, are we going to have to do this thing every year? Like the flu vaccine, unlike, what was it? Polio. I think, that's where the folks, everyone had the scar on their shoulder. Our parents have it, right?
Well, that was,
Where's that?
that was smallpox.
Smallpox,
Yep.
right. That was a one-time thing. You didn't have to take it every year.
Right.
So now we don't know.
Nope.
So now it's.
See, that goes back into the whole, okay, we had 4 or 5 years of trials, and to be able to see how it's going to affect, how it's going to do, we've had this 8 months, and that's it. So I'm like, you don't know what it's going to change. I mean, with the whole, I mean, in the UK and seeing some now in Canada, this whole mutated strain of the COVID-19, that I'm like, okay, so it can change. So there's a possibility that they might have to tweak some things or figure out a different, I don't know. So.
Well, that went into my next question is they're talking about, here's this vaccine, things are going to be great. Oh my gosh, there's a mutation over in the UK that the current vaccine doesn't even touch this new version of the COVID-19.
Right. And I mean, I haven't looked enough into what exactly this new mutated part of the virus is to know exactly what the difference is versus what we have now. So
one thing that was on TV, I think it was about a week ago, that didn't help folks who were on the fence about it, was when the hospital in Texas had the nurses line up and they gave the injection. And then they noticed that the one nurse actually didn't receive anything. They did stick the needle in, but the plunger was already engaged. So they just touched it and rubbed it around. And then the hospital had to come out later and goes, yeah, well, don't worry. They received it after. So they got a second injection. Yeah, you can Google that one.
I missed that one.
Yep. What is the name of that hospital in Texas? I'd have to go back and Google it. But I was sitting there and I was reading the article, and then I went back and watched the video. And being someone who's given thousands of injections, I was like, if you're really trying to encourage, and I hate to use the words convince the general population that this is a good thing, why would you have someone on television get a needle with nothing?
Right.
Like, no, that's not helpful.
Not good PR there. No,
that's not helpful.
I think it's been good to see some of the top people get it, and to know, okay, if they're getting it and things are doing fine, but it's going to be hard to convince a lot of people that, okay, this is the vaccine is good, to get it.
Yep. But that feeds into the people who say, well, look, if they're, if Trump's going to get it, if Biden's going to get it, if Pence gets it, if Fauci receives it, do they really get it? Because if this nurse is pretending to get it on TV, how do we know that they're really getting it?
Yeah.
Awful PR, folks. That was bad. That was bad. If you only had 4 vaccines to give instead of 5 or 3 versus 4, let's just have him sit out until we have a dose to give him. It just, the optics aren't good. Not good.
I know. But I mean, over the last, what, 2 weeks since they've been given it, I mean, on my Facebook feed, I have seen, I don't know how many pharmacist friends of mine that are in the hospital, north, south, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, that have posted their card, I mean, of getting it. So I'm like, I've been pretty impressed with the number of people that are getting it in the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a ton. It's the new, someone told me it's the new face mask profile pic. It's your vaccine card. um, Another thing that feeds into or starts a conspiracy is when we're like, for example, I think it was Dr. Vin Gupta that was on CNN was saying, just because you get the vaccine and even after the second vaccine doesn't mean things change. You have to wear the mask. You need to social distance. You shouldn't travel. And all of these things should stay in place until everyone's received the vaccine.
Right. And I mean, it's not that everyone's going to receive the vaccine. I mean, we know that. I mean, I would even probably say 50% are going to get the vaccine, but they're wanting enough to start building up that immunity, to build up the herd immunity, so that it'll cover, if so many enough people get the vaccine, it'll help cover those that didn't.
Yeah. And there was something that I think Fauci had to eat a little crow a couple weeks ago because he was a little deceptive on herd immunity and how, yes, there's herd immunity, but we really need to get the vaccine first because he was afraid that people wouldn't take the vaccine if they put too much preference on herd immunity. This isn't kind of like the chicken pox where one kid gets the chicken pox, you just bring all the neighbor kids over and
and then you're good.
And then you're good. Right.
Yeah.
So it's a totally different ballgame when it comes to that. So I think there's still a lot of hesitancy out there for people, and there's still, I mean, you can say conspiracies, you can say whatever you want, but there's a lot of things that people see and that the media feed into that actually start the conspiracy. Like when the doctor says what he says, and then when you see a fake vaccine be given to a healthcare worker, what are we doing, folks? One last question for you. I was reading something out of Russia where they are not recommending, I think it's Russia and India maybe, but they're recommending if you receive the vaccine not to drink alcohol for the first 2 months after. Are you seeing anything like that here?
That's a first one that I've heard.
So their reasoning behind it was not necessarily because it interacts with the vaccine, but you get the vaccine, your immune system might be a little low. If you go out drinking, your immune system will continue to be low in these countries that are, known for drinking. So they're saying like, you need to be the healthiest you can be after you receive the vaccine. So eat, exercise, and try not to drink alcohol.
Well, I mean, I would say that with anything right now. I mean, you definitely want to make sure, I mean, during the flu season, I mean, during winter months, I mean, you want to make sure that you're healthy, that you're eating right. I mean, but as far as knowing whether that's true or not, I don't know. I don't know. So
I will say, I was having this conversation with a buddy of mine that it's amazing that we can come out with a vaccine in such a short amount of time and we can start giving it to people. But yet, coming from someone who was diagnosed back in July to some people I know who were diagnosed within the last week or two, the treatment for someone diagnosed and sent home is the same, which in my opinion is no treatment. It's water, Tylenol, and try to get your rest. And I know we're so concerned right now about overwhelming the healthcare system, which is, and rightfully so. But it seems to me that we would be doing a better job of prescribing things for people to take at home other than water, Tylenol, and rest. There's misinformation out there. Right when I was diagnosed, they were saying that oral steroids were very helpful, but the inhaled corticosteroid Pulmicort or budesonide, which I took, which was great for me and my wife, really turned her around. They were saying no proven science of that, but take oral steroids. Well, we did the inhaler. Now a friend of mine's mom, dad get diagnosed a couple weeks ago. They're in a emergency department and I told them, ask for the steroid. They told them steroids don't work. So they gave them those steroids. They gave them a bag of IV fluid, admitted them to the hospital. Hospital's packed, had to stay in the emergency department for almost 20 hours. And then they finally were discharged home with nothing. And she had to go back. So it's just interesting that we've come so far to help prevent us from getting it, but we've made no progress of what to do when we get it so we don't have to come to the hospital.
Right. And I think that's where there's still so much gray area. It's not black and white. Nothing with this is black and white to know when to treat, what to treat, how to treat, because everyone's going to be treated different. Sure. And that's the whole thing, is no one person is going to present the same as someone else. So, I mean, for me and you, it might be you present one way, I present another way. And one hospital might treat one way, one hospital might treat another. It's so much unknown right now. And so I think that's where, I mean, people are just trying to wear your mask, social distance, stay home as much as you can, just to help keep that. But I know when you go into the hospital, it's like, what's my treatment options? This one might say here, this one might say this. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I've seen steroids coming through the pharmacies. I mean, that's probably the biggest one that I've seen. I mean, I can't keep zinc on my shelf.
That was going to be my next question.
So many people are coming in wanting zinc.
Vitamin D.
Vitamin D. I mean, we're trying to make sure we keep and stock all that. I'm like, but that's stuff that any normal person, any year, anytime should be taken. So
yeah, because what is the American population? 70% of us are vitamin D deficient.
Oh gosh, yes. Oh yeah. And I'm like, you can't be outside enough to get up to where you should be. So we know
it wouldn't hurt us to take vitamin D or zinc, especially during flu season or during the pandemic, or vitamin C along with that.
Oh yeah, I mean, vitamin C, I mean, that's just to help boost your immune system.
Right.
So I mean, anything like that to help prevent. And I mean, that's kind of been the whole other, I guess this has kind of been my conspiracy thing that I've heard. Well, with someone asked me the other day, they said, how many flu cases have you seen this year so far? And I said, I think one.
Yeah.
And I mean, most of the time by now, we've already seen a couple.
Well, you probably prescribed Tamiflu a few times.
Right. And I've not seen a thing. And so it's like, but you think about it, everyone's keeping their distance. People are wearing their mask. Kids aren't in school as much. So, I mean, you're not going to see it. But
and this is now what a predatory or dominant virus that's out there. So if someone's going to get sick, they're probably going to get this versus the flu, I would assume.
Right.
But even so it's pretty low. And I'll tell you something else that doesn't help to the conspiracy that we're saying. A friend of mine that that we went to high school and graduated with was recently and celebrated a 40th birthday this month, was diagnosed with COVID right at his birthday. So I didn't get to go see him. But he was there, he was swabbed, and he asked, well, can I get a flu swab in case this comes back negative? At least we know if I have the flu or whatever else. They said no.
Right.
He said no, but I want a flu swab. They told him, if you want a flu swab, you can leave the facility and go somewhere else.
Oh, gosh.
And he was like, so
yeah,
if I'm not COVID positive, do you know I have the flu?
What am I?
Not care if I have the flu? Don't y'all want data to find out if it's the flu? And he was just, he couldn't believe it. And I said, that's how things keep feeding into, there's no flu cases this year. They're not even, it seems like there's a lack of testing, could be a lack of testing for it as well. I don't know.
Oh, I'm sure. But I mean, I think right now the main focus is on the COVID testing and all. I mean, I don't know as far as supplies or what with testing for flu, but yeah, I mean, that's where it seems like just everyone's focus is on COVID.
Yep.
So,
well, is there any other information you'd like to give the listeners out there if they have questions, or is there anything that you want to debunk or tell them not to worry about other than the microchip?
Well, yeah, I mean, no microchip. I mean, just kind of my thought on the whole vaccine. I mean, I'm thinking of everyone else and who I'm going to be around, who I'm going to, my parents, and anyone that is in that high risk category. I want to keep them around a few more years. I want to be able to be around them. I don't want to give them something that could potentially harm them, i.e. the virus. So that's kind of my take home is I'm not just thinking about myself, I'm thinking about others that I will be around and want to make sure that is protected. I mean, it's going to be a while before the general population will be able to get this vaccine. I mean, I'm hoping that with this new bill passed in Congress, that funding will be able to roll out more vaccine to everyone sooner, to be able to start with getting out of the 1A, 1B, 1C, and actually getting into the general population. So, I mean, the sooner that we can do it, the better. But still wearing your mask, keeping your 6 feet distance. I mean, still going through all that until, I mean, it's probably going to be summer or fall before we can tell a difference and be able to. I mean, I had a friend the other night who's like, I'm ready to go travel. I'm ready to go somewhere. But I'm like, well, yeah, I am too. But it's like, okay, what's the risk benefit and how can you do that right now, really, and know that you haven't been exposed? So I don't know, but it'll be an interesting next few months.
Yeah, for sure. And if anybody, do you have a website where people could look up anything at Banner Drug to find out any information about you guys or delicious lunch menu?
We're in the Facebook is probably the best place to find us at Banner Drug with the most up-to-date info. I mean, we do have a website which we're in the process of revamping right now, but I mean, the CDC and the North Carolina Department of Public Health or Department of Health and Human Services, I mean, they're a great resource. And even the Iredell County Health Department is great. So, but I mean, there's all kinds of information out there. I mean, you have to do your homework as far as knowing what you're reading, where it's coming from, and making sure it's a reputable source.
Right. Well, I won't keep you longer because I know you're at work, but thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. And thanks for all that you do for our community. And if you guys haven't had a chance, stop in at the Banner Drug and Banner Grill and get something to eat and get some BioLite.
Of course. Of course.
All right. Thanks, Melinda.
Brandon.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.